I picked this book up earlier this year at a book market, and I've never read any Henry Miller. This is Black Spring by Henry Miller. It's a collection of short stories, and so far I'm enjoying his writing voice, his style, his long rambling sentences. Now the reason I picked this book up is that on this page here, this is a sticky note that I found on the page when I was browsing in the market. Naturally, I had to grab it because I have a collection of banned books. This is also a banned book, also by Henry Miller, and Tropic of Cancer is another one that is a banned book. They just like banning Henry Miller, I guess. This video is not about Henry Miller, it is about banned books. Every year in September, I try to make a video about banned books as part of the American Library Association's Banned Books Week, which happens every year. This phenomenon is a celebration of literature that has been censored or challenged or banned. It is the celebration of the freedom to read. I think it's quite an important one. Every year, the American Library Association publishes a list, a top 10 list of books that were targeted by censors that year or the previous year. Now I am going to go into the latest top 10 list released by the American Library Association, but first I want to talk about banned books in general. So when we're talking about banned books, we're talking about books that have been challenged or objected to by people, by groups of people, by countries, governments, customs officers, school librarians, teachers, school boards, parents. Now historically, some very well-known books have been banned. Books such as this one, and also this one here, and this one as well. Books that you very well may have read in school have been banned as well, like this one here. Also this one, and also that one. You've possibly heard of or have read this one, and sometimes banned books can surprise you. Even this children's board book, this storybook with some lovely illustrations in it there, it's pretty cool. Even this book has been banned. So the kinds of books that find themselves on this list are often the ones that portray things like LGBTQIA themes, and books that depict puberty, sex, drugs, race, religion, rebellion. Some of these books have even been illegal to trade or possess in certain countries, in certain parts of the world. Even here in Australia there have been banned books, and there are still some right now, including this one here. More often than not, when we're talking about book bans in the 21st century, we're usually talking about censorship in the classroom or in school libraries or in public libraries in academic settings. In the United States of America primarily. This is where most of the reported challenges are coming from. There are quite a few instances of these book challenges happening here in Australia at the moment as well. There's been a little pushback about the use of the word banned because people claim these books aren't banned, they're just removed from classrooms, they're just unsuitable for this person or that person. And to that I say, I don't think it's up to anyone but the person reading the work whether it is suitable for them. I think people gravitate towards things that they want to read, to learn about. Maybe they're curious, maybe they want to explore their identity. I think it's important that they have access to these books when they need them. Books are a source of information. Books are knowledge, and knowledge is power. I don't think I really need to talk about why banning books is bad. I think it's pretty obvious. And at the core of all of it, I think the reason people ban books is because they want to retain control in the sense of being able to prevent ideas that may not align with their own taking root. So in essence, book banning is just the result of fear. The world is changing, it's becoming more inclusive, and it's important to have these books available to people so that they can learn, so that they can find themselves. Silence is never the answer, and not talking about things and not learning about things usually leads to catastrophe. It doesn't prevent people from discovering who they are. Libraries in particular are supposed to be these centers of learning, these places of unbiased access to information so that people who want to seek information can access it. And I think parents should be open to having discussions with their children about the books that they read and ultimately what those books mean to that child. It's far more productive to have open conversations with your child about the books that they're reading and help them learn about themselves and the things that they value. If we are not free to learn the things we want to read, are we free at all? To quote one of my favorite fantasy authors of all time, George R.R. Martin, "When you tear out a man's tongue, you are not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say." The American Library Association meticulously documents reported challenges of literature, publishing figures not only for which books have faced censorship, but statistics on censorship growth or decline. The data they publish is usually from the previous year, so I will be referring to figures from 2023. The ALA documented 4,240 unique book titles targeted for censorship in 2023. A 65% surge over 2022 numbers. They also documented 1,247 demands to censor library books, materials, and resources. Pressure groups focused on public libraries in addition to school libraries. Now, the ALA has also released data for the first 8 months of 2024, specifically relating to libraries. And as you can see, there were hundreds of attempts to censor library materials.
The data is suggesting that there has been a slowdown in reported cases of books being challenged, and if this is accurate, then this is a good thing.
Now, these are the top 10 books that were banned in 2023. This list does look quite similar to the list from last year that was published by the ALA, which is not surprising. Conservatives are still afraid of conversations around race, sex, gender. And so these are the books that are facing the brunt of the challenges at the moment. Genderqueer, for LGBTQIA content described as sexually explicit. All Boys Aren't Blue, for LGBTQIA content described as sexually explicit. This Book is Gay, for, surprise surprise, LGBTQIA content, sex education, and claimed to be sexually explicit. The Perks of Being a Wallflower, for LGBTQIA+ content, depictions of drugs, sex, assault, and swearing, and claimed to be sexually explicit. Flamer, LGBTQIA+ content, claimed to be sexually explicit. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, for being sexually explicit and graphic. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, for being sexually explicit and containing swearing. Tricks, claimed to be sexually explicit, containing depictions of drugs, sexual assault, and LGBTQIA+ content. Now this one's interesting. Let's talk about it. The Teen's Guide to Sex, Relationships, and Being a Human, for sex education and LGBTQIA+ content. Now I feel like books on sex education are pretty essential, and banning something like that is pretty silly. And the last one on this list is Sold by Patricia McCormick, for depictions of sexual slavery. So yes, many of these books have been on this list before for several years, and you can clearly see a running theme with the kinds of books that are being censored and challenged in schools and libraries. I also wanted to briefly mention an incident that is related to censorship. Here in Victoria, Australia, a free writing bootcamp for young writers was to be held at the State Library of Victoria. This was supposed to happen earlier in the year, but it was cancelled a day before it was supposed to commence because the library supposedly had concerns about some of the organisers and some of their pro-Palestine, anti-genocide messages on social media. And the library released this really vague statement about how this was to protect children, which basically doesn't mean anything because it sounds to us like they are just coming up with excuses. It's worth noting that this same library cracked down on staff wearing pro-Palestine pins on their uniforms, which sounds less like a measure of safety and more like a suppression of one's right to be public and transparent about their beliefs, suppressing their right to show their support for a humanitarian cause. Libraries are literally doing the opposite of what they're supposed to be doing, and the ramifications of this are devastating. Now I want to show you a book that is not a banned book, but it is a biography written by someone who wrote a banned book, Salman Rushdie. This book, Knife, came out, when did it come out? Like last year, I think. This year, came out earlier this year, and it is a recount of the attempt on Salman Rushdie's life in 2022, having faced death threats and bans and censorship for his book, The Satanic Verses, all around the world. He was giving a speech about the safety of authors when he was attacked, almost fatally so. He sustained serious injuries, which he outlines throughout his book. I read this book in the lead up to Banned Books Week because I just wanted to read the thoughts of an author who has faced censorship in the harshest sense of the word. For so many people, as soon as they hear Salman Rushdie, they think of the Satanic Verses and they think of the death threats and the attacks that he has faced over the years, and so I just wanted to read this in the lead up to Banned Books Week. I plan to continue expanding my research about banned books and expanding my collection of banned books as well. Books enable us to make informed decisions about our lives on a small scale, and on a larger scale, they have the power to shape the ways that society operates. For some, this is terrifying, but it shouldn't be. It is up to younger generations to keep this world from burning, and the books that they choose to read very well may determine whether there is any hope for a better future. I'll leave you with a quote from the great Oscar Wilde from The Picture of Dorian Gray. "The books that the world calls immoral are the books that show the world its own shame." That's all from me. I'll see you soon.